Alrighty, folks. Welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast coverage of the 2025 Iditarod. Super stoked to be here. It's been, kind of building, and obviously me running the show without Sean, it's a little nerve-wracking at first to get things going. So I'll be excited to get through this. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on our guests and welcome them on. Eddie, Josh, how's it going? I'll start with you, Eddie.
What's happening?
Thanks for joining, man. For those of you who can't
No,
tell,
thanks for having.
Eddie's in the dog yard right now. So he just got finished doing a run, and he's taking some time to do this. So I appreciate you doing that, man.
Yep. No, thanks for having me.
Of course, man. And Josh, welcome on, man. How's it going?
It's going good, man. It's Iditarod Eve. It's the Super Bowl, man. It's here. It's time. It's exciting.
Dang right. I love the way you put that. That's Sean and I oftentimes we talk about how like this is the Super Bowl of mushing. So it's here and we're excited to kind of get into things. I'll just give a quick update on Sean. I got a chance just quickly to talk to him maybe like 4 or 5 hours ago, and yeah, he had already been in Fairbanks for a while. He was in the middle of a meeting. Not sure why he answered my call, but I appreciate it, dude. But yeah, he was telling me that in the near future, not sure exactly when, he was going to be going over to the Manly checkpoint. So that's the most recent update on Sean. I just thought I would give that to you guys. And then I wanted to ask you guys before we kind of get into some questions. Like, you guys are home right now. Is there like an itch at all about wishing maybe you were in the race, or how do you feel about being home versus not on the trail? I'll start with you, Josh.
Oh, it's killing me. It's it's killing me. I mean, I wanted to be out there this year, but just the shoulder and everything just didn't work out. But it's in watching your buddies go down the ceremonial start and the interviews, and yeah, I wish I was out there right now for sure.
But soon enough. So
Next
uh,
year, next year, I'm
yeah,
calling. We're signing up. So come hell or high water.
I love it, man. Love to hear that. And then Eddie, what about you? What are your thoughts? I know that you had two in a row. You ran. You got Rookie of the Year. Then you sat out these last two. Is there a sense of you wishing you were in the race? Or are you kind of like happy with where things are? I know you have like a younger dog team.
Yeah, it having a young dog team of just yearlings, it makes it a lot easier to not be racing. But obviously, that urge to compete and be in the race is still there. Um, I I miss it. Um, I'm having fun with this young group of dogs, but there's just something about doing Iditarod in the whole experience, the process, the whole build up to it. Um, it's a one of a kind experience. So I I was lucky enough to go down to Anchorage yesterday and see everybody at the ceremonial start. So that was nice, but it was definitely a good time down there. It seemed like good vibes. All the mushers are happy, ready to get on the trail.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That was my next question. I was going to ask. I know, Josh, you're not in Alaska right now, so you weren't at the ceremonial, but was curious if there's anything else that would be worth mentioning in terms of your what you saw there at the ceremonial start. I know it was a shortened route. I know they brought snow in. Is there anything you want to kind of mention there?
Yeah, I mean, it was like you said, it's only a mile and a half. For the first time, the dog teams were beating the handlers down to the finish line there. Um, but everybody was in good spirits. 8 dogs, was the limit there. So instead of, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, is it usually 12 or 10 for the ceremonial start?
Usually 12 for the ceremonial.
12, yeah.
So, but it looked like 8 was the perfect level because, man, by the time they got to those last couple teams, there was not a whole lot of snow left at the start.
It was just, it was so warm and so soft. Like, there's no base to it. I mean, the municipality does a phenomenal job hauling in snow, and they take the piston bully over it, and they take they take graders and all that, and they do a good job at putting in a trail. But when it's warm, there's just so much they can do, and you could hear all the brakes just grinding and dragging across the asphalt, going down Fourth Avenue. But yeah, it was a good time down there. There's, I don't know, I think Cody and Paige, they were like doing Hawaiian theme. They were getting tropical down there. Like, there was people in different costumes and people having fun. The fans were out as always, so it still felt like a traditional ceremonial start.
Looked like there was a ton of people packed downtown too.
Yeah, I don't know if there was maybe as many in years past, like as far as right there on Fourth Avenue, but I mean, it was definitely a good turnout, and it looked like Cordova. It had a good string of people all the way down it to the Sullivan Arena, so I think all in all, good turnout.
Good.
And then my follow up there is obviously, is there any intention of getting up there to Fairbanks, or maybe not so much for you, Eddie?
No, no, I won't be that dedicated, but I'll be watching the tracker and tuning into the live stream, and you know basically trying to get every little update and piece of information I can. I'll be following closely.
Right on. Well, good deal. I want to get into, I wrote down a couple different questions and topics to kind of go through. For those of you who've already watched our part one, we kind of got our hands dirty with some topics already. We've kind of talked a lot about the front runners. We've done, some predictions with Rookie of the Year. But before we get into all that, I wanted to start with, kind of everything that leads up to the ceremonial start. You've got the meet and greet, you've got the banquet, the bib drawing. For me, it feels like there's a lot of obligations that you all as mushers have just before you even get to the start line. So I guess my question, I'll start with you, Josh, is what is your memory like of the meet and greet and things leading up to the ceremonial start?
So I guess my experience is a little different because the 2 years that I ran, we were still dealing with COVID. So the years that I specifically ran, there was no banquet, there was no meet and greet. In my rookie year, there wasn't a ceremonial start. Um, there was my second year, but but you're right. For the mushers, there is a lot of events and meetings. There's the several weeks before, there's the EKGs that you have to do, then you have the vet checks, so there, I mean, there is a lot leading up to even just the ceremonial start. So once those guys pull the hook tomorrow, all the hard shit will be behind them, and then they can just focus on their dogs, and then the added element of having to traverse the Fairbanks. So like the Fairbanks mushers, they've just been going back and forth and back and forth. So it's it's really fun to do those events, and it's really great for the fans and all that. And I got to experience quite a bit of that last year with Wally, but it is a lot for the mushers, and with balance and everything else. But it'll all be in the past once they pull the hook tomorrow. So
Yeah, Sean has said many times when we've had various guests on, it's just like getting to the start, and just pulling the hook. It's just like once you finally pull the hook, you finally have like nothing to worry about, just you and the dogs and getting to like do the whole thing that you're trying to do in the first place. Um, and I guess Eddie, your experience is probably pretty similar as well. If I recall, your years kind of overlap with COVID as well. Am I right?
No, well, I think no, we didn't have any real strict COVID. It was 2023 when I ran. I don't even think we had to do testing or anything like that. But it was, it's stressful for sure. Getting to the starting line, I have always said it's harder than the race itself. I think that's the toughest part is getting to the starting line. And I remember when I was doing my drop bags, I had just finished Cusco, and then I was trying to get my team like stretched back out and close up drop bags and get those turned in. And I like reached out to Pete and I'm like, dude, is it always this tough? He was like, yep. Even for myself, he goes, it doesn't get much easier. It doesn't get less stressful. It's just how it is. And I was kind of a one man show, so it's a lot. So it's like you said, when those mushers pull the hook, it's a huge relief.
Yeah, we've heard it time and time again. And then just quickly talk about the bib drawing. That I'm not watching that personally, but it feels like it's probably like kind of a long event. Like talk to me, Josh. I'll kick it back to you. Talk to me. I guess you're saying you didn't have the bib drawing. It was like not a
It,
normal bib
it, it was
drawing
it
experience.
was random. It was randomly assigned by computer. But one thing that I will say um, about like the banquet, and one thing that I've liked, um, I think they could probably mesh the two. But so it used to be like a musher would draw their bib, and then they would be able to speak, and thank their sponsors. And as we all know, some mushers like to talk more, and sometimes the bib draw would go on till 10, 11 o'clock at night. And now um,
Yeah.
they give each musher a chance to make a video. Like I think it's like you can make a minute video and introduce your dogs or talk about your sponsors. And I think Greg Heister does a great job putting it together, those intros together, even for the mushers that don't do an intro, don't submit anything. So I really like that format. Some people say it's not as personal, but I think it keeps the evening from dragging on. So I like the way that they're doing it now. So
Right on. Well, I appreciate you guys just kind of giving me a little bit of the perspective of things, and of course, the Fairbanks restart. Obviously, that throws a little bit of a wrench into things in terms of logistics and all of that. But let's go ahead and move into some talking about some more mushers. And so I went back, I looked at the list of mushers, I kind of was recollecting what we talked about and stuff. There's a couple of bigger names that we didn't talk about, and I wanted to kind of ask you guys about where are they at heading into this year's race. So the first name I will toss out there, and I guess I'll throw it to you, Eddie, is Travis Beals. We had a very great showing from him last year. He led the race for part of it. He finished strong. Well, he finished top 5, top 10. Um, so I'm just kind of curious, where are we thinking he could be this year? How's he looking going into this?
I don't know much about Travis's, training regiment and how his team's looking. I haven't talked to him personally much. We said hi to each other at the ceremonial start. He seems to be in good spirits. He's got a beautiful looking dog team. I don't doubt he's been working extremely hard to try to capitalize off of last year and continue to, close that gap and be right there in the winner circle. So I think Travis has a team that's capable of winning. And I think in many cases it's usually the musher that's the weak link. We're the ones that are making mistakes or kind of falling apart or what have you. So Travis is a good dog man. He's got a beautiful dog team, and he's been doing this for quite a while now. I mean, he's probably got at least a decade of Iditarods under his belt now, and he's got a handful of top 10 finishes. So I, I think he's very capable of being right there. It's just a matter of, I think keeping himself, in the right place and, executing a good race plan.
Yeah, this will be his 11th race, and last year he finished 6th place. So I didn't know that off the top of my head, but I did a quick little back check to add to that. Josh, did you have anything you want to add about Travis just before we move to the next person?
I mean, I realized after we got off kind of the preview that we didn't talk about Travis. I mean, just watching the interviews from kind of what I've gathered, just watching the different interviews and everything, is I think Travis learned a lot, when he was leading the race last year. So, I think he's going to grow from that. And depending on the trail conditions, I know we kind of talked about this before. If there's a decent trail, it will favor the teams that religiously haul dogs, and Travis is one of those people he religiously hauls dogs, and he's very good at it. Um, so if we have a trail that's somewhat hard packed and fast, and he can haul dogs, efficiently like he normally does, I think it will definitely favor him. He's only done one other race this year, and that was the Knick, and he took it pretty easy. But I think he's been training hard just like everyone else, and he's hungry, and he obviously has the dog team that could potentially do it. So
I love that comment that you started off. You're like, yeah, I went back. I thought a little bit more about who we talked about or didn't talk about. I love that you're analytical like that. So the next person in that same vein on my list, a name that is well known within the mushing community in Alaska, specifically in Iditarod, I feel like Nick Petit. What are we expecting from Nick this year? My perspective, that's like, I see you laughing, Josh, which I'm glad to see that you're laughing, because when Sean and I talk about Nick, whether it's on the podcast or off the podcast, I feel like the consensus is you just don't know exactly what you're going to get with him. But I'll throw that one back to you, Josh. You can start with Nick. Thoughts on him coming into the race?
Man, Nick is just always a wild card. He's so fun to race around because you don't know what he's gonna do. You don't know what he's gonna bring to the table. I mean, Nick has competed at the top level. Like I was looking back in 2017, the last time, the race ran out of Fairbanks. He was third, I think, only like 3 or 4 minutes behind Dallas. Um, so he's done well on this route before. I think he knows how to do it. He knows how to compete at the top level. It just really comes down to the dog team that he's going to bring to the race. I saw that he posted on Facebook tonight that he's kind of got his final 16 chosen, and he's borrowing a couple dogs from different people, which is great to see. But Nick is always a wild card. You just never know.
Yeah, Eddie, you have anything to add to things on Nick?
Yeah, he's a unpredictable musher, but he has the skill, he has the knowledge, he's got a nice group of dogs. He's been in Eureka training, just about all winter long. So, and he went to the Cusco. So, you get around the track there, and you got a dog team that's going to be set up well to compete. So, I think he should have a competitive team. I think he's definitely has the ability to have a top 10 finish. I don't know if it's in the cards this year for a win, or the depth of his team or anything like that. But I think to count him out of the top 10 would be crazy.
Nice. I like that take. And again, keeping things moving. I know that Eddie, before we went live, you were like, "How long is this gonna be?" The sun's going down. I could tell behind you, so I'm like, "All right, I want to keep things moving as efficiently as we can." So with that, another name that I didn't feel that we talked much about was Mila Porcild. So Eddie, I'll toss it back to you. John and I, when we've talked about her in the past, like, we know that she is a tough, tough cookie. Uh, I'm almost positive last year she like was super sick and just powered through and somehow finished strong somehow some way. So what are we thinking about Mila heading into things this year?
I think she's one of the most competitive people in the race, just as far as that kind of inner drive, that urge to be competitive. Like, that's someone that will, cut off their leg to win, type of thing, if they're in the position. So Milla's not afraid of long runs. She's not afraid to grind it out. And she's got a team that's mostly returning from last year. Most people know that, like, Milla only has a handful of dogs herself, but she leases dogs from Dean Osmar, Jim Borkwin, Dee Dee John Rowe. I think she's got one or two from Jesse Holmes. So she goes around, she gets handful of dogs from multiple kennels, and puts together an incredible dog team, which is not an easy task when you're leasing dogs. So yeah, I think she's going to be right there in the mix. I mean, she's this is probably her fifth or sixth Iditarod now. She's had multiple top 10 finishes. I think last year was her maybe best finish, or it's at least second best finish. So I think we'll see good things.
Yeah, just quickly chiming in here. So yeah, this is her sixth. She's done the last five in a row. 21, she got fifth place, and last year she got seventh place. But 3 out of 5 top tens. That's pretty darn solid. So, Josh, did you have anything you wanted to add about Milla?
Yeah, so it was really interesting, watching her kind of one-on-one interview with Greg Heister on the Insider. Milla comes more from like an expedition background than, a racing background. She did expeditions for 20 years before. And, one thing that she said that really stuck with me is, when they were doing expeditions, she was happy going 2, 3 miles an hour, up above the Arctic Circle on ice sheets where there's no trees or nothing. So that's been a lot of talk with mushers, is all the river is going to be boring. And for her, she's like, I love looking at every piece of snow, and even if the snow's, or the trail is slow and boring, like, we're still going to be having fun, and we're just going to be grinding it out. And I think, like Eddie said, that's definitely where she has an advantage, is she's just a very, very mentally tough person. And, if you've been happy going 2, 3 miles an hour on a dog team, if the river's tough, you're doing 6, 7 miles an hour, like that's freaking gonna be great. So I think, mentally going into it, she definitely has an edge.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you look at her schedule, like, from last year. I think she had like 5 runs that were longer than 10 hours. Like, she's going slow, and doing 10-hour plus runs is not a strange thing for her. She doesn't mind grinding it out. So it I don't know. It could be a good thing for her, on this route.
Nice. So those are three that I had written down that were kind of in my contender category, I guess you could say, that we didn't really talk about. There are some other names I want to kind of get to, but we did get a question from someone watching, so I kind of wanted to transition into a topic that we haven't discussed. It's been the top of the discussion every time Sean and I've done a podcast lately, and that's talking about the weather. So I'll get to this person's question in a second, but Josh, I think you were pulling up the weather before we got going here. Can you just give us an update on what we're expecting, at least for the first like tomorrow and maybe like the next day of the race, weather-wise?
Yeah, so it's tomorrow's going to be really warm, leaving Fairbanks, which is so crazy, because in 2017 when they ran this, it was 40 below at the start. But like I'm just looking at the weather forecast for tomorrow. By 3 p.m., it's going to be a high of 39. And there's going to be very little wind. Um, and the little bit of wind that there is going to be at the mushers' backs, which is even going to be make it warmer for the dogs. So, taking off at 11, that first run over to Nana is going to be, in the heat of the day. And then really, I mean, it's like I'm looking as we're going down the Tanana and the Yukon, it's gonna be a really warm race, um, which is gonna play into a lot of factors of when people take their 24s and take their eights, and there's gonna be a lot of strategy and seeing how people try and get their schedule to where they're resting during the heat of the day and running at night. So
And so that was, I love that answer, and it plays perfectly into this person's question. So thank you for the question, Mister D Barry. Uh, the username is not D Barry, but I'm not going to say the actual username. So this person said, with the trail breaking and the insider crew packing down the trail at 40 above on the river, do you think it could set up and potentially create a fast trail when the temps drop? And I'll toss that one to you, Eddie.
If it does drop, into the teens or below freezing, yeah, it can develop a nice crust. When you have a lot of wet kind of snow, a lot of moisture in the snow, and you get that packed down and it gets below freezing, especially if it got down, into the teens or around zero, you're going to have a nice crust that develops there. So, but if it's going to stay upwards in the high 30s, it's going to be a mashed potato type of trail, especially the more teams that go across it and break through that crust.
Nice. Well, we appreciate the question, Mr. DeBerry. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to put them in there. If you have a specific musher that we haven't talked about, I'm happy to take any suggestions or questions that you have about that. The next thing I wanted to do, I had two different. Oh, shout out to Red Dog there with Eddie's team. So I've got two things going here. So I was curious if either of you have any dogs in the race, either dogs that you've loaned out or dogs that you've used in the past that maybe you've sold or anything like that. So I'll start with you, Josh.
nope, I don't have any dogs in this race. A couple dogs that have been a part of breedings on, um, but nope, we didn't lease any dogs or anything like that this year. So
Gotcha. And what about you, Eddie?
Um, as far like Bailey Vitello bought Aaron's dogs. So he's got a handful there of kind of that young group that I had and developed and raced, and those were all my babies there. So I know Bailey's taken a few of them. Milla's got a few that I trained up and raced last year, from Dean Osmar's kennel. Who else? And then Ryan Reddington has, I think, a couple of dogs, from the dogs that I leased from Wade Mars. So there's some really nice dogs out of Wade Mars kennel that I had last year and raced. Ryan has a few, and I know his B team with Dan Klein, there's a few there as well.
Nice. Yeah, I meant to ask that question. When I first asked you guys, like, do you wish you were in the race right now? Or you guys are home as the race is about to start? That was like a follow up question I skimmed over, so I wanted to kind of circle back around. And then the other question I wanted to ask this. One of our fans messaged me this earlier, and I wasn't aware of it, but Emily Robinson is going to be doing the trail with her dad and Stanley, and it's like I know that I've talked to both of you extensively about her before. Josh, obviously, you loaned out your dogs last year to Wally, so just it. Josh, can you tell us more about what you know about what she's doing?
Yeah, I was actually talked with Wally on the phone today for about an hour. We hadn't talked for a while, and I could hear him in the background frantically packing. So yeah, they're gonna take a 12 dog team and a snow machine, and they Wally been talking about doing this trip for a couple years. Um, with it being the 100th anniversary of the Serum Run. Um, and they were kind of planning on doing it, and then you know, oh, Nathan, um, gosh dang it, I can't think of his last name. He just did kind of the recreation of the Serum Run. He made it to Nome. He had a lot of problems on the Tanana and the Yukon with overflow, so they had kind of scrapped the trip. And then when Iditarod made the last minute decision, to move the start to Fairbanks, they're like, "Yep, we're going." So yeah, they're actually planning on leaving tomorrow from their house because their trail system is the same trail system that we train on, that Eddie used to train on. The race is going right past our place, so they're gonna take off from there and head to Tullavana Roadhouse and Manly and Tanana, and they're gonna just try and make it to Nome before the banquet. So um, it'll be they're gonna try. They're not running a race schedule or anything like that, but they need to make it to Nome in 2 weeks basically. So they're just gonna have a fun time, and yeah, it's Wally, Emily, and Stanley, so they're gonna have a great time. It's gonna be awesome. So
Man, that's awesome. I love that. I love that. Eddie, did you have anything you want to add about that?
No, just it seems like a really fun trip to do. And I know Wally. I talked to Wally, Emily, and Stanley at the ceremonial start, and I think they're really looking forward to it. And it's pretty cool. Emily's going to stop at some schools, like at Tanana, I believe, talk to the kids, do some stuff like that. Um, so I think that's really cool of her and the Robinson family to be able to take time out of their trip and talk to the kids and talk to the villages and just be able to share this thing we do.
yeah, I'm hoping that she can inspire some younger mushers, because with the salmon situation on the Yukon, there's not many dog teams left kind of on the Yukon River right now. So hopefully she can inspire some of the younger kids along the Yukon, and we can get some more mushing teams along the Yukon.
Right on. Yeah, no, I just saw that, and shout out to Cindy. She's the one who has she made me aware of that. So I was like, oh, I'll ask the boys. I know you guys are in the loop with her and the family and all of that. So Eddie, I know that you're kind of getting close to like losing all your light. So I've got two.
It's fine. People don't need to see my face.
Oh man,
But
the
they gotta see the
combination.
hair, Eddie. We don't care about the face, just the hair.
I literally, I literally was
Connor
about.
McMahon, he's got that covered this year.
Yeah.
He's gonna let those luscious locks flow.
Josh, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was like, yeah, we don't really care about seeing you, but we want to see that hair.
It's all tucked in right now.
So I want to. We didn't really talk a lot about strategy. And there are two different things within strategy that I want to talk about. And you guys have kind of already alluded to some of the first part of the strategy. The weather conditions are going to be not favorable for a start where you got 33 teams, leaving from the same area. And so I'm curious, like those lower numbers that are leaving first, like are those people maybe like we gotta send it? We gotta like take full advantage of like having a fresh trail versus those that are like close to the 30s, right? They're gonna have like really crappy conditions, right? So like I don't know. I'll toss this to you, Josh. How does that affect things from like a strategy standpoint, your bib number and combined with the expected weather that they're getting tomorrow?
You know, it's really tough to say because I mean, I think once it gets to 1, 2 o'clock, I looked at the weather, uh, an hour ago, and it was 39 degrees in Anana. So I don't think the trail is going to set up tonight, regardless. In a normal year, when you're leaving Willow, you want to be one of the first ones out, and try to be one of the first ones to the Happy River steps. And I think if it if it gets cold enough at night, the trail will set up, but you'll get to a certain point during the day where it's just going to fall apart. And excuse me, for some of the heavier traveled parts of the trail, um, it won't be as big of an issue. But for some of your more remote traveled parts, like between Tanana and Ruby, you're gonna get a thin like layer um, on top, and then once that breaks through, it gets soft. You're kind of screwed. So as far as like strategy and the weather for tomorrow, there's I with how warm it's going to be and the soft trail, I think the strategy and kind of listening to the interviews is going to be to hold the teams back, even if they want to go fast. Hold them back, get through the first couple days, get in your rhythm, not fall too far behind. But it'll be interesting to see if anyone tries to run out front and first. You know, um, I don't think we're going to see a lot of people try and make any big moves right off the bat, because it's a long race. I mean, you're not going to win the race in the first day, but you could certainly lose it. And having an 1,100-mile race um, is going to definitely play into that.
Eddie, did you want to add anything about things for
You
tomorrow?
know, there's one nice thing about running in the heat. Um, the dogs just kind of gear themselves down naturally. Seems like, of course you do have that first couple hours of excitement, and all the adrenaline and the other dog teams and the people. So the dogs are going to be naturally, they're going to be like, all right, we're in a race environment, we're amped, we want to get down the trail. But usually, in warm weather, that they can kind of take that edge off and really start to gear down, and they ease down the trail a lot more instead of when it's cold and cool. They're feeling really good, and they want to drive and drive and drive. So that is one benefit about the heat. And they just naturally really kind of preserve themselves. So it's kind of a nice thing, long as you can keep the dogs hydrated and eating well.
Gotcha. All right.
One thing I was just kind of thinking about too, this with the warmth too, like if you have genetics where you have dogs with really good feet and you're comfortable with running them without booties during the heat, that's definitely going to play a huge part too. um, because that's where the dogs get rid of a lot of their heat is through their feet. So if you have dogs with good feet and you can haul ass down the trail with no booties on, then you're gonna be, it's another one of those little things that nuances, right? That you got to think about with your breeding and the dogs you're gonna take. And
The problem is just no one really does that nowadays.
No, they
far
don't.
as far as training without booties, that was something like I learned from Tony Browning, and he's as old school as it can get. And I used to try to train without booties as much as conditions would allow for it, just to get the feet nice and tight, just to get everything toughened up. So if I ever was in a race and I had to do a run or two or however many, um, the dogs would be able to, without getting any foot issues. But everybody just puts on the boots these days. And, you look at their feet, you walk by the dog teams, they're all webbed out, and, you
Hmm.
know, they don't
Well,
have tight, you know, all those little muscles and tendons. They don't really have to really develop when they're always cinched up in a boot. So it's a good point for sure, but I think there's very few mushers out there that are doing that and keeping the hairs all trimmed so snow and ice isn't collecting on them. And
yeah.
like everybody puts the boots on, and that's
I,
off you go.
I'm the same way, Eddie, because A, I hate putting on booties. B, I hate having dogs with bad feet. And C, booties are freaking expensive. So
They
the
are.
longer I could train without them, the better. And yeah, when I was a rookie racer racing in Idaho, um, Jesse Royer actually taught me. I mean, he's really warm. It's the start of the race, and dogs were hot. We've been training in Alaska. She's like, just take your booties off. And man, like the dogs are just so much happier and their feet were fine. So shout out to Jesse for that.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's like when you pull in from a run and you take the dog's booties off, it's like mine just kind of stand there until I take them off. And if anybody watching them, they would be like, that's not too animated of a dog team. Like, they don't look all that great. But then as soon as they take their boots off, they're like jumping around, rolling around, like wagging tails, getting all happy. They don't like them.
Yeah.
At
Yep.
least my crew doesn't.
I love the rabbit hole that we went down there. You guys trading
Sorry.
stories back and forth. No, I love it. I think that's great. That's why we pay. I pay you guys the big bucks to come on and do this, right?
Yeah, buddy.
So on that note, we got a question related to kind of the weather and stuff like that. So the question, same user, Mr. D Berry. How well will the South Central dog teams handle the heat compared to the dogs from the interior? So let me toss that to you, Eddie.
You know, I don't think the interior has just been cold, all winter long like it usually is. So, we've all experienced warm weather all winter. Um, it was a lot of teams did the Copper Basin. It was a really warm Copper Basin. Um, it was a warm Cusco. It was a warm Connect. All these dogs have been training and racing in warm weather all season long. So no matter where you're training out of, I think everybody's acclimated. And you know, eh, the other thing is I was talking about this with Jesse Holmes, and I'm like, hey, a good dog team is a good dog team. It doesn't matter the trail, it doesn't matter the route, it doesn't matter the temps. You could train on a groomed trail all season long and get out there in an absolute slog. And a good dog team, they'll handle it just fine, and they'll motor. Um, and it just goes to the preparation, the training, the genetics, and that's just what it boils down to.
Awesome. Good stuff there, fellas. I appreciate you guys. The other thing related to bib numbers that we were kind of talking about offline was, you have that trio, Jesse Holmes, Ryan Reddington, Riley Dyke, all starting it back to back to back. And then I looked even further at it. It's like, okay, so you've got that little trio, and then you also have Michelle Phillips above that, and you have Milla below that. So like that fivesome is potentially all top five right there, or top 10 at least, which is kind of just interesting to note. So the question, I guess, there, and Eddie, you were the one that kind of brought this to my attention, so I'll ask it to you. But like, does that really matter that such competitive teams that are hoping to top 10, top 5, maybe win? Does it matter that they're starting next to each other in a race this distance? Does it maybe get them to like break from their strategy that they're like riding next to someone who may beat them, kind of thing? Like, thoughts on that?
You know, if we got 5 mushers all leaving really close to each other, I bet we got 5 different schedules, and they'll all come together probably around the end of the river, around Caltag or so, which I think will be a popular 24 spot. Is just kind of my guess. I'm thinking you're going to see, 24s taken further down towards Caltech. Um, so that's where I think you'll see schedules kind of come together. But everybody's going to be, I mean, there's only so many ways to break up the very first run of the race. So we might have, guys are either going to basically run just shy or two Ninana in camp. I think that's where you'll see a lot of beginners or conservative teams go. You'll see maybe some teams blow Ninana just to get out of the hustle and bustle of things and the noise, and camp off the trail, and then proceed on to Polavana, or maybe just before it or just after it. And I think you'll see a lot of teams, competitive teams blowing Manly, blowing Tanana, trying to get further down the trail, so they can break up those longer runs, especially that run from Tanana to Ruby. That's a long stretch. So blowing those checkpoints will allow them to just kind of inch down the trail. So I think the competitive teams will all kind of have that in mind. So, they'll be camping around each other, but I don't think anybody's like going to be following, like, oh shit, Jesse Holmes just pulled over. I guess I better pull over right here too. I think these are all mushers that are thinking for themselves, and kind of have their own ideas in mind.
Right on. And while you were talking there, Eddie, I went ahead and pulled up the map. Josh, did you have anything you wanted to add to that topic of either starting so close to each other, but also Eddie kind of my next question in this little category that we're in was to talk about the strategy behind the 24 hour, and you kind of hit on that there, Eddie. So, Josh, anything else you want to add on either of those things?
So the 24 is going to be really interesting this year. And I think a lot of it that's going to play into it is where Iditarod sent bags that were already sent to checkpoints. I was listening to Jeff Dieter's interview, and he said he sent stuff out to 2 different checkpoints to 24 this year. And if he's going off that, that basically shoestrings him to either 24 in Caltag or Eagle Island, which is interesting because like I'm just looking at the race mileage here, and it sounds like a lot of people are gonna 24 or trying 24 in Caltag, but for example, like Caltag 1 is 456 miles into the race. Eagle Island is 526. And where like last year, they were on the northern route, the majority of the teams chose to 24, neither McGrath to Cotna or Ophir. McGrath is 329 miles into the race, and Ophir's, roughly 425. So, Ophir's, I guess, close to Caltech, if I'm looking back here at my notes right. Yeah, so I think we'll see a lot of teams 24 in Caltech, and then some teams probably push to Eagle Island. One thing that does always come into play in your 24 is how efficient you can be with your dogs. Caltech is obviously an established village, so there's going to be a lot more accommodations. Eagle Island is, a remote camp, um, on the Yukon River. So, um, so that's a decision that are going to be weighing on people's minds is, you know, what's best for the dog team, what's best for them, because the 24 is just as much about the musher as it is the dog team as far as recovering. Um, so it'll be really interesting to see where people 24. I think um, if you 24 before Ruby, it's probably not that great. But like I said, a lot of it depends on where the Iditarod sent their bags to. And I haven't seen the list of what correlates to, like if you sent bags to McGrath, where did they send those bags to? Because you have to have enough food for yourself and for your dogs to stay there for 24 hours. So that's going to pay. There's a lot that's going to play into it.
Yeah, and I think I saw that list briefly, and I want to say like Ruby was like McGrath basically, and Galena would have been kind of like Takatna. And a lot of teams, they were, questioning like, do I take it there, or do I carry my bags, from Galena to Nulato, or and then maybe carry bags from Nulato to Caltech so I can take it there. So there's going to be mushers, I think, definitely um, hauling their bags and doing some shuffling there. Because the way it was laid out, it just seemed like it was going to be a little early, especially considering the route. They're not having to go over the Alaska Range. They're not having to go through the gorge. They don't have that kind of long, grueling run to Nikolai. That kind of first half of this race, I think, is a little easier than the traditional route. Of course, it's going to present its own challenges, but I think getting further down the trail on this route, to take your 24s is probably best. I think Caltech's a great area for it.
Well, and especially since, like if you take your 24 and Ophir, you've got roughly, 450, 500 miles of trail left. Well, now we've got an extra 150 miles of trail. So if you 24 too early, I mean,
Yeah. And then
it exasperates itself even more.
You're relying on your 8, and then you got a long push, so you got another 8, and you'd almost have to probably take another 6 or an 8 in there, if you're trying to be competitive. And taking 8-hour breaks is not a competitive schedule, so it would be tough to balance all that. And like you mentioned, Eagle Island, I mean, that would be a miserable place, in my opinion, to take a 24. I mean, they do a great job. Is it Tyrell CV that usually does that pop-up checkpoint?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, they do everything in their power to make that place, a great checkpoint. But you know, it's usually cold. That might not be the case this year, but it's usually a 30, 40 below type of spot with and in those temps the propane heaters don't work, so you just got a tent with no heat, no place to dry out gear. You're melting every time you want to feed. It's just, it would be a tough place, hard on mushers to take a 24. I don't know if we'll see anybody send it past that. That would be a really long push to try to go to Grayling or something where there is some real nice amenities. Grayling's a nice place. Shagaluk's nice. But I don't think we'll see anybody go that far down the trail.
Yeah, Eagle. I mean, I've never been to Eagle Island, but if I would imagine like that would be like 24 in for the people that 24 in Ophir that year, where all the mushers stayed in one Arctic oven. Like they couldn't get any of their gear dry. Like they were melting snow for every feeding. That's why so many people 24 in McGrath, because we had all the amenities. So there's just a lot to be said about that for the mushers and the dogs.
Yeah, I mean, every every hour really counts, on that 24. It goes by really quick. because, when you get in, you're taking harnesses off, you're taking the jackets off, you're want to take advantage of this 24-hour time. So you're putting the foot ointment on, like you're doing all this little dog care stuff to like really recover the dogs as much as possible. And so like your checkpoint routine is a little bit longer. And then of course you're on a feeding program. So you're trying to feed the dogs, every, 4-6 hours or so. You're going out there, either whether it's a light meal, a watering, throwing them a snack. So just having to do what you probably got 4 meals in your 24 that you're feeding. So to go out there and take a half hour to fire up the cooker and melt snow, I mean, it's a lot of time, where you could be resting and taking care of yourself.
Nice. You guys gave a thorough answer there. That covered all the different like angles that I was gonna kind of ask about, and in doing that, you also answered one of our viewers' questions just about the food drops being dropped off before the start was moved to Fairbanks that you guys kind of covered. So good job there. So yeah, the last thing that unless you guys, if there's a musher you want to talk about, if there's something you guys want to bring to the table, I fully welcome it. The last thing that I had on my list that I wanted to talk about was kind of like the building. Maybe like is there tension right now between like the people that wanted the southern route versus the people that wanted it changed to the Fairbanks? Like, is that even worth talking about? Is that like, I don't know, we don't have to like create drama, but like just thoughts on that. I'll throw it to you, Josh, first.
I mean, obviously, I'm not there, so I haven't really been involved in those conversations. I'm sure some people are kind of angry and whatnot, but they at the end of the day, the Iditarod made the decision, and we signed up to or everyone signs up for the Iditarod, so you just kind of you got to roll with it and with the punches. At the end of the day, I think it was seeing some of the pictures and stuff from the ITI. I mean, Burn looks pretty rough. um, but at the end of the day, one thing that I've tried to teach myself is there's no sense in bitching about the trail or the conditions or the route or whatever, because at the end of the day, every other person that you're competing with is having to do the same route and the same trail and the same conditions that you're dealing with. So, you know, no one trained for this. Everyone got the news the same day. You can't change things you're training around in 2 weeks. So everyone's in the same boat. So, you might as well just enjoy the ride.
Yeah,
Eddie, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think what Josh is saying is basically spot on. And of course, when it was first coming out, there were some Facebook feuds and everybody chirping, and you know, this time of year, everyone's stressed. We're preparing for the race, or they're preparing for the race. And if you have something in mind, and it's like we're doing the traditional route, and then it's all of a sudden changed. I mean, I can get the frustrations, but there's no way it could have happened down here. I mean, it was 54 degrees today. Here in the sunshine, it was 44 in the shade. It rained all morning. There's no place for a restart down here. I think it's glare ice all the way to Squitna. Like Josh said, the burn's rough. So I think the right call was made. You're gonna have not everybody's gonna agree with you, and that's just life. So I think it did create some tension there. Some mushers frustrated with other mushers for maybe voicing their opinions or trying to push for a certain route. But, you know, I think I think everybody's probably over it now. And now it's just time to, time to run dogs. And, if you're frustrated with another musher, I think the best thing you can do is just beat them on the trail. you know
Yeah, I mean, I think you said that well, and you know, leading into an event like this has got to be such a stressful thing. I know Sean, he's got like being thrust into it the week of, which is like in some ways is almost nice because he didn't have that crazy build up, right? It was just like week of and he's doing it. But then like the following year, he had the whole year build up of doing it again. And yeah, so obviously, you're stressed out, tensions are high, whether there's other mushers voicing their opinions or not. So I think you guys did a good job answering that one.
Well, and mushers are passionate too. I mean, we're passionate about our dogs, about what we do, and passion. It just creates tension naturally.
Yeah, totally true. We got one more comment I'll just share. Johnny Chimpo. He says, kind of bummed on these temperatures at the moment. 40 degrees today. I hope the mushers get off to a good start. It's been a strange winter this year. And yes, Johnny, I'm in Atlanta, but we've talked about it quite a bit on the podcast, and hell, even here in Atlanta, we've had two snows that we don't normally see snow at all. So, and it's been significant for Atlanta's standards. So, anyways, well, boys, I appreciate the time tonight. I think that we've covered a lot. If there's mushers we haven't talked about or other topics that we haven't talked about, like there's going to be plenty of time for us to discuss those along the way. Our next live that is planned is going to be the same time on Wednesday. So that's 6 p.m. Alaska, 10 p.m. Eastern. If there is some sort of crazy thing that happens or some sort of breaking news worthy story, if there's a moose that gets ran over again kind of thing, then we might pop on for a quick one and kind of break it down real quick. But we'll kind of let a couple things within the race develop. And so thanks again for joining us tonight. Thank you again for your time, Eddie and Josh, and see you guys Wednesday. Thanks.